I find it rather odd that European theologians are not summoned and called upon to publicly denounce on national television the social pathology of white supremacy introduced to the world by their theological predecessors. The Catholic Church, Catholic popes, and European theologians are the sole architects responsible for the origin, design, and execution of the social concept of white racial superiority and black racial inferiority. The practice of Christianity in America was founded upon the practice of Christianity in America was founded upon inhuman racial prejudices prescribed by the Pope and implemented by Christian conservatives of various denominations, including the Ku Klux Klan and white British Israelites. Today, white celebrity preachers such as Kenneth Copeland, Benny Hinn, Jesse Duplantis, Pat Robinson, Joel Osteen, Rick Warren, Jerry Falwell, Paula White, Charles Stanley, John Piper, Joyce Myers, and John Hagee control the mindset of white Americans and have acquired great power. With great power comes great responsibility. The sign of greatness is not a $65 million jet and a lavish lifestyle, but responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. To demand all men are treated just. White theologians have the responsibility to denounce the insidious pathology known as white supremacy. White theologians and white preachers are the only social architects and social engineers who can deconstruct the mental disease of white supremacy that now plagues white Americans today. Only white theologians can change the ungodly beliefs white Americans have come to love. Only a paradigm shift in the mindset of white Americans will eradicate the denigrating effect of racial discrimination and racial injustice. Protests against barbaric acts of individual racial discrimination and systematic racial injustice manifested by racist institutions are protests against the mindset and beliefs of white Americans. Acts of racial injustice are not committed by artificial corporate entities such as the police department or the court system, but white men and women born of flesh and blood who embrace a corrupt and dishonest belief system caused by the false ideology of white supremacy. Protests across America and around the world pertaining to racial injustice and institutional racism are not demands for an economic stimulus, reparations, new legislation for police accountability, or procedural changes in the administration of governmental practices. In reality, protests across America and social uprising around the world are demanding relief from the pathological mindset of white Americans and their European cousins infected with a mental disease called white supremacy, introduced to the world by the Pope in the 16th century. The real change demanded is not political, economic, or social, but mental. A change of heart is free and not burdensome. The fight for racial justice and the eradication of white supremacy can only be achieved with the leadership efforts of white preachers and white theologians. If white preachers are serious about racial injustice, racial inequality, and the moral decay of America, they and they alone are the only ones that can turn off the faucet of systematic racism flowing from the minds of white Americans. White Americans reflect the moral leadership of white preachers. Without question, white preachers control the behavior and attitudes of white American citizens. White preachers and theologians understand Black preachers are given the same deference by Black Americans. Understanding the influence Black preachers have with Black Americans, white preachers are not hesitant to demand Black preachers control the behavior and mindset of Black people in times of social unrest. White preachers invariably insist that Black preachers instruct the Black population to take a non-violent approach when expressing their grievances. Invariably, in times of social unrest, white politicians direct Black preachers to, quote, control your people, end quote, if Zimmerman was found not guilty. In times of social unrest and social protests, Black preachers and civil rights leaders must have the same audacity as white preachers and demand white preachers denounce implicit and explicit acts of individual and systematic racism. Black leadership must demand that white preachers take the lead to deconstruct the ideology of institutional racism and insidious belief systems confounded upon the false pretext of white supremacy. Black leadership must demand that white preachers take the lead to deconstruct the ideology of institutional racism and the insidious belief system founded upon the false pretext of white supremacy. Racism in America is not the result of African American governance of American institutions. Black people do not control the institutions that rule America. The ideology of white supremacy is a social pathology created by white European theologians hundreds of years ago to justify and legalize a worldwide criminal syndicate authorized to steal, rob, murder, rape, kidnap, and enslave any and all Black people throughout the world. The moral values prescribed by this unholy criminal organization was the foundation of America and European culture, a culture created by European theologians that can only be deconstructed by European theologians. The social construct of white supremacy, introduced to the world by Catholic popes, is a mental sickness that can only be effectively deconstructed by white preachers. Therefore, any effective demand for the eradication of racial injustice must be directed at white preachers and white churches. Marches on state capitals, state legislators, or Washington, D.C. is only beneficial to the personal egos of men who are praised for their meaningless events that do not change the mindsets of whites, Americans, or the white population. Again, marches on state capitals, state legislatures, or Washington, D.C. is only beneficial to the personal egos of men who are praised for these meaningless events that do not change the mindset of America's white population. These so-called Black leaders are merely celebrities seeking personal glorification. Remember, Rome never embraced Jesus, nor any of his disciples. That's it. Redirect your focus. Bring about real change. And everybody march on the most prestigious white celebrity preachers and theologians in the country. We're out.